I'm going to run through my favourite epics, basically all of my epic collections. So I've got Spider-Man, I've got Master of Kung Fu, Doctor Strange, Fantastic Four, Thor, Captain America, and X-Men, Daredevil, and many, many others. Now, there's sadly quite a few epic collections that I would love to see. Submariner comes to mind, Spider-Woman, She-Hulk, etc. Not every series has come out in an epic collection. Well, what are epic collections? They're from Marvel, normally about 500 pages in colour. They do vary times size, but they're this size. So you can see the general size of them. They're generally very decently designed. You've got the standard style. So if you've got all these collections, you see them all in a nice row. And often they have obviously a title. The Great Power, in this case, this is volume 1. Gives a cover with the great power and also the main contributors. And, of course, epic collection at the top. And then it gives at the back. They always put like volume 1, also the years, 1962, 64, also the contents and a bit of a brief description. In this case, of course, Steve Ditko. This is volume 1, Amazing Fantasy 15, etc. And generally, they always include, obviously it's all colour all the way through. In most cases, there's some black and white if it's like a magazine. And it includes like the annuals. So you've got like the Sinister 6 story, the classic story, as well as pin-up pages, etc. And also often includes bonus material at the back. And this one's particularly good because it's got the artwork from the original Amazing Fantasy 15. So it's got that, and that's just brilliant just for that. And you've got some great stuff. And I love this one. This is Epic Collection, Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 1. So I'm going to through them, not in any particular order. I'm going to split the video into 2 as well, because I've got another batch that I will go through in another video. Now, this one, Master of Kung Fu. This one's Volume 2. Now, I'm not a mega fan of martial arts. Iron Fist is fine, all those sorts of things. I did read them at the time, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, etc. But this, I love these ones. Especially I read them initially, the British comics, with, of course, black and white, which are fine. Thoroughly enjoyed those. But the Paul Gallucci art, I absolutely adore. So some really classic artwork throughout this. And again, it's got some bonus material at the back. This is Volume 2, and you've got some great stories. Obviously, Return of Fu Manchu, and those sort of things. Just a classic. Then you've got the Hulk. This is Volume 3. This one's The Leader Lives, which sort of gives it away. Quite often I love the way that when you say, well, you shouldn't have spoilers or something, and I think, well, so the book's called The Leader Lives. Well, does he die in it? Of course not. We know that. And you've got the Sandman on the back. So there's a bit of a clue. And of course, gives a bit of a description. And you've got the brilliant Herb Trimp, or Trimpe. Trimpy? I don't know how it's said. My apologies. This one is generally very good. Some great stories. The Shifting Sands, you've got Sandman, Inhumans, Mandarin. You've also got some right clunkers in it. And that's always the way with all these things. It's not consistent. You've got 20 stories generally. They're 20-ish stories. So depending on the size of the book, the comic at the time. Obviously, Tales to Astonish, like, it would be 10 pages. Then, of course, he had his own comic with 18 or 19 pages. So you then got into this one, Captain America #4. Now, I have to say, wasn't particularly fan of this stuff. There's some okay stories, more duff stories particularly, but some decent ones as well. So it's got the Kingpin. So this is Volume 4. You've got Batroc, you've got Scorpion, you've got Mr. Hyde, and also you've got the original, the Atlas version of Captain America, the 1950s version of Captain America. I love the back. I don't think they actually appear. It's always weird sometimes. Some of the when these sort of things, I look at them and think, why do they include those? How odd. Anyway, still, it's okay. Not a favourite. Now, Iron Man, this has got some decent stories. You've got Titanium Man, you've got Mandarin, so you've got some classic Mandarin action there. Where he's freezing poor old Tony Stark / Iron Man. Also, it's some of my favourite stories is this one. I love this one. Brilliant one with Submariner. It's Jack Kirby. Just absolute classic. Just beautiful story, that one. Also, you've got some stories that I was not the freak character. We got Old Happy, and he's changed. Wasn't fine with that. Still, it's a good book. I love that one. So you've got lots of things where you've got problems with Stark Enterprises, etc., and the Senate. Now, this is a classic. Avengers. This is Volume 1, 63 to 65, and this is the early Avengers. And I loved Thor, Iron Man, Wasp, Giant Man, Captain America. And of course the Hulk was the original member as well. And of course you got the classic there, Submariner. And of course Captain America at the back. At least they put Captain America at the back there. And you got some really great stories with them. And then you got the crossover where you got the new Avengers, which was Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye, as well as Captain America, of course. And then eventually, of course, Goliath. Then you got Bucky Reborn. This is volume 3. And this is some good stories. And not all brilliant, but some still pretty decent artwork. They're decent enough stories. I wouldn't say it's Gene Colan that I would 100% recommend this one. There's also some absolutely awful artwork in this one as well. Not the fault of the artist. I'm quite certain the artist is apt because it's Gene Colan. But for some weird reason, in most cases with these epic collections, you've got some. This one is a case in point. One, it's a terrible story. Really not a great story. But the art is terrible. Most times it's really crisp. You look at it and go, wow, they've really made a real good. But this, I had to say, looked really quite clunky in places. Very odd. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't have the pages or something. No idea. But that does happen occasionally. The worst cases I've seen is sometimes in like DC ones. Sometimes weirdly covers. Covers seem to be the ones where they obviously haven't got the original material to go from. They've done it from like the comic book. And you look at it and go, awful. And it doesn't happen too often in the epics. Most of the epics, I think obviously with 40s it probably would, because of course original material is probably very hard to find. But a lot of they've obviously got good quality material to go to with these. And mostly are good. Now this one's an unusual one. This is volume 2. The Coming of the Falcon. Got this Falcon story. And also you've got some brilliant Steranko in this. Got this classic Steranko. Just love Steranko. Captain America. And also you've got Captain America here with Jack Kirby, of course. Jack Kirby created Captain America back with Joe Simon many, many years ago. But you've got different inkers, which is always nice. You see lots of Sid Shaw's. So you've got the Sleeper Strikes. Now, I'm not certain what one that one is. Sleeper, probably number 25, 33. I've lost count how many sleepers there are. There's lots of. Red Skull seems to love his sleepers. So you've got, this one's brilliant as well. The Coming of Galactus. So this is Fantastic Four, 33 to 51. Truly some of the epics. Obviously Jack Kirby, Stan Lee. You've got Galactus, you've got the Inhumans, Silver Surfer, and many more. Frightful Four. I love the Frightful Four. Love the Frightful. It's got the wedding, of course, as well. So you've got the brilliant Frightful Four. I loved Frightful Four stories. Also got some classic. That's some pretty good titles. Diablo, Behold a Distant Star, Scrolls, etc. So this is just one of my favourites. I love this volume. Volume 3, The Coming of Galactus. You've got that as well. Then you've got The Wrath of Odin. Well, Odin was always wrathful against poor old Thor. They didn't seem to have an easy relationship most of the time. So some good stories. The only criticism I always have these sometimes is, but finally I think at this point, yeah. No, you still got the Tales of Asgard. I wish they had separated these stories. The stories are great because you've got all the story all high evolutionary, but then you suddenly break, then you've got the Tales of Asgard, which probably worked in the comics when they were coming out, but I just never rated them, putting them in here. I wish they would have been a separate epic collection. I think there is a separate book, Tale of Asgard book. So you've got the Destroyer. Because they didn't include the Inhuman stories. The Inhuman ones didn't get in here. So if you're going to include Tales of Asgard, why not include the Inhumans? Thunder God and the Troll. So Ulik, however it's pronounced. The Growing Man. Then you got poor old Thor being bashed around by the slugs like, but of course, we know Super Skrull. Love the Super Skrull. Great character. Ringmaster. And you've got the Wrecker. Good old Wrecker. So this is a great one. Volume 3. I love those stories. Then to Star Wars. Now this is the only volume I've got with Star Wars one. I really like Star Wars. but I've never bought any more. There's so many Star Wars books. I just got to the point where actually there's so many, an overload of them. I know some people probably their whole epic collection is based around Star Wars, which is fine, which is great. But I wanted this one because this is volume 1, and these were the stories that I grew up on with. So you've got some great stories. Of course, we had these in the UK Star Wars comic, and I loved them then, and they're still absolutely brilliant even now. So great stories there. Daredevil 3. This is Brother, Take My Hand. Now, I would have to say that there was some iffy stories in this one. So you've got some Barry Windsor Smith, you've got Gene Colan, but the stories, the villains were a bit, the Jester, Nighthawk. I wasn't enamoured by this one, so it's not such a favourite. Volume 3. This one's okay, because it's got the classic story, obviously the 2 classic stories. You've got the Goblin, Gwen Stacy, etc. And also you've got, of course, Hulk, you've got Luke Cage, got some Peter Parker and the Hulk. This was a period when I started to read comics, so it's great to see the Hulk stories. Some of them I didn't get because we suddenly had a distribution issue in the UK where suddenly these issues were not readily available. They were, then suddenly they weren't. And the thing was, I'd only started reading them at that point, so I really hadn't got so enthused into Spider-Man that I really must trace the issues, so I never bothered. So I just basically, I had quite large gaps in my collection. And you've got some great stories there. You've got the old, his robot again looking for spy scanners. Yeah, good yarns, that one. Then you got this one. This is now, I wasn't so enamoured by the Daredevil stories when I first started out reading this really again. I've read it a few times, and recently I reread it for 2 book reviews, and I've been obviously doing the book reviews, and I actually quite liked them. And then after reading it, I thought they were some very good stories. So thoroughly enjoyed this one. Blind Man's Bluff. You got classic, obviously Cobra and Mr. Hyde. I love those stories, as well as some. There was a few not so great stories, but some brilliant art by Gene Colan. Just absolutely glorious. This is volume 2. This is Daredevil 41. Also, it's got the annual, and I love the annual for Daredevil. Just because it's one of the oddest annuals of all. It's like Sinister Six, but not really the Sinister Six. But it's still a very good annual, and it's a good book. That one, Captain America. Captain America Lives Again. I love this one. This 1963, 67. You got some really odd ones. Strange Suspense, Tales of Suspense. So 58 to 96. And this one, The Army of Sass. Some of the stories also were slightly odd because they actually go back into the war period. So they start out, and I never understood that at the time. I still don't understand it now. Why suddenly the stories went from the modern period to the war period. And when I first read these books, I got them in different orders, of course. I would pick them up and I was thinking, what? Why are we now in the wartime? Because I've seen some comics where he wasn't in the wartime. Very confusing. Confused me anyway. And well, obviously it all led into the Sleeper story later on. Yet again, the Sleeper. Sleeper 1, 2 and 3, I think. Maybe 4, 5, 10. I lost track of the Sleepers. But there's still some classic. And there's also the classic, of course, Cosmic Cube. Loved the Cosmic Cube story. That was the introduction of that. I've got the original comics as well. Batroc. You've got Gil Kane. Again, this is another one, slightly odd, where the restoration was slightly odd. But in general, the restoration in these books, just superb. Really, really crisp. But there was a bit of a roughness to those issues, those particular issues. Then you got the Hulk. Again, you got In the Hands of Hydra. So it's always weird. You've got the Hands of Hydra. Called In the Hands of Hydra. So you've got the cover with the Inhumans on the front cover, Maximus, of course. And then you've got on the back, you've got Iron Man. So why call it The Hands of Hydra? Why not? And now the Hydra story is a small part of it. But you've got some good stories all the same. You've got the Leader. You've got the Glob. You've got the Avengers. Now they do also, you've got some of the classic early, quotes, Defenders stories, where they were sort of like starting out with the defence of Doctor Strange, Submariner, etc. Some classic stories. You've got Rhino, I love that one. And also one of my favourite ones, this Hulk 122, when he goes to meet the Fantastic Four. And that's just a classic at the Baxter Building. Brilliant. Then Avengers, Once an Avenger. Goliath returns. So you've got the classic group of, and I always enjoyed these characters. Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Hawkeye and Captain America, of course. But you had then a few sort of average stories at the back. But there's some good ones. Power Man and the Living Laser. Some brilliant there. And Thor Against the Flood Tide, which is a bit of a mouthful. Surely Thor Against the Flood. I've never understood Flood Tide. Obviously not being no idea, the Flood Tide. However, that was just a classic. And of course, you've got Wasp, and you've got Kang, of course, great story there. So this is a real lovely volume. Love this one, volume 2. This one's good as well, the Iron Man. Now, this is volume 1. Now, this got some really quirky stories in. Love the early Iron Man. If only Iron Man would go back to this sort of feel. They never would. Now, of course, you've got stories that are like 200 comics of one sort of long storyline. And then maybe that's what people want. I'm certain they do. Maybe, obviously, people maybe like me would like more oddball, quirky stories. But then again, I probably wouldn't buy them. So that they're not going to sell to me then as well. So because I'll probably be buying epic collections. Because if they collect them all, that'd be fine. But you had these great stories. You had like Doctor Strange, of course, different Doctor Strange. And then you had this one, what were her name? Carla or something. Carla, Queen of the Netherworld. Just great. I'm certain she never reappeared. And the Crimson Dynamo. You got Melter, Mr. Dole. You got Angel as well, of course, the brilliant Ditko with Iron Man, Black Widow. They were just absolute Hawkeye, of course. True classic stories, Mandarin. Not all brilliant. The Phantom. So you got some stories that are a bit duff, like Somewhere Lurks the Phantom. Well, that didn't. But however, that volume has just got relentlessly brilliant stories in. I love that one. Volume 1. Now you got this one, and this is volume 4, Spider-Man. The Goblin Lives. Well, the Goblin Lives. Well, it's got some classics. You've got Doctor Octopus again, Kazar. That's pretty amazing. And of course, you've got the robot again. Poor old Spidey's always facing the robot. But also you've got black and white as well in this one. Very few of these books have black and white, but this is from the Spectacular Spider-Man book. Next issue, don't miss the rebirth of Green Goblin. Of course, that did happen, but of course it was a colour volume. You've got Mysterio. You've got other stories. I love that Mysterio story. Some classic ones. This is volume 4, The Goblin Lives. Again, this is one thing that often with these books, they sort of tell the story. Well, maybe if I was buying this and you don't want any spoilers kind of thing, so why do you put the word The Goblin Lives? Maybe you could have called it The Mysterio or something like that. Mysterio sort of strikes. Something. And because the Goblin's a bit in the book, but he's not the major character. So you got that. Then you got X-Men Volume 2. Now, I love the X-Men, but this wasn't particularly my favourite set of stories. There were some good stories. The Juggernaut story is great. Love that one. But there's some also El Tigre. I mean, the Locust one. I actually quite enjoyed it, but it's a bit of a ultimately duff stories. There's a lot of those sort of Cobalt Man. They were struggling, I think, at this point. I don't know what happened. We, the jury, some of the characters were a bit Frankenstein, the Subhuman. And also, well, they had this weird split here where you had stories like this one, where you've got the Cyclops. So it's a solo story, but it's a sort of like the origins. I don't know why they introduced those, but they did them all for Marvel Girl, Beast, etc. So you had sort of origins. And of course, you've got Magneto there as well. And again, bonus material. But it's okay. But it's a set of 3 volumes of the original X-Men. And of course, after that, they went for reprints. Then you've got Sergeant Fury. Now, I love this one. This is volume 1. Now, I'm not a war fan, like martial arts, not a war, but I do really love this one, Sergeant Fury. Some really great stories. They're really quirky stories and worth checking out. So if you just think, oh, well, Sergeant Fury, not really interesting, I think you'd find this an interesting book. Baron Strucker, you've got some just quite, even though it's war, there is a lot of humour, lots of comradeship, lots of characters doing crazy things all the way through it. They're basically a superhero team, but obviously in a war setting, some excellent artwork as well. So obviously 1940s, obviously the stories weren't done in 1940s, the stories were 1963 to 65. And finally for this video, just going to go to the last one, Marvel 2-in-1, The Thing. Presents The Thing, I should say. This is volume 1, 73, 76, and I love this one because it's actually got Marvel Feature 11 to 12, Marvel 2-in-1 to 1 to 19, and Marvel Team Up 47. And they're just some classic tales. And the reason I like it is because you've got lots of different characters. Didn't stay with the same character. You got lots of different villains because, of course, quite often what happened, you had like the Thing and Iron Man, and you would have the characters that Iron Man would face. So you would have his villains. You wouldn't have the Thing's villains. You'd have Iron Man. So you'd have quite a mix of storylines. You had the Man-Thing. You had also a classic story when you got them going off to the Badoon into the far future stories. Just classic. And then you've also got the Executioner, Puppet Master. You've got some, right, sort of, the closest equivalent for me is probably the Strange Tales ones with the Human Torch and the Thing. And that's a good one. But that is a complete collection. Now, weirdly, Marvel have got this sort of separate universe of stories, the complete collection. Sometimes they sort of cross over. There's sort of, I always think, oh, that's more an epic than a complete. But that's got some great stories. The Scarecrow's in it. And also another thing they often did, they would often finish off stories. So you have like a character that was a minor character, or a minor-ish character. And the story, the book would be cancelled. And then what happened? They often finished the stories off in things like this, where you'd have like, that's how it ends. So you'd find out like Scarecrow, that would be his last story. So this is a really good book to check out. So Marvel 2-in-1 presents The Thing. So we'll now do a second video very shortly.